Inquiry into mental illness, Human Rights Commissioner Brian Burdekin delivered a scathing report about the lack of services and the difficulties facing people with mental illness in Australia. 2 weeks before his report was released, Commissioner Burdekin gave NBN reporter Jane Anderson a revealing interview indicating the extent of the problem. He said the government's policy of moving people out of psychiatric hospitals and into the community has largely failed.
Federal Human Rights Commissioner Brian Burdekin says the promise of community care to replace large psychiatric hospitals hasn't become a reality.
Well, one of the reasons I believe, and again I'm not preempting the findings of the inquiry, but one of the reasons I believe deinstitutionalisation has largely been a failure for many people is we have left them in hostels, in boarding houses, in the community, completely unsupported. We've left them without the facilities, we've left them without people to monitor their medication, to gain care for them when they need care, to get hospital treatment when they need hospital treatment. And that's, I believe, one of the great tragedies, and indeed it assumes the proportions of a national scandal, that thousands of Australians who are seriously mentally ill are not getting any treatment or any appropriate and timely treatment.
The Hunter region was singled out for particular criticism. About 200 people with chronic mental illness live in hostels in the Morisset area, just down the road from the region's main psychiatric hospital. Few have access to rehabilitation programs. Brian Burdekin says appropriate policies on housing and allocation of resources are required. Another topic dealt with by NBN was suicide. More people in Australia die from suicides than motor vehicle accidents. Again, linked in with the Burdekin report, it was revealed Australia has the unenviable reputation of having the highest youth suicide rate in the industrial world. The number of youths committing suicide in the 20 years has tripled. Brian Burdekin claims the lack of services for youth in rural areas has accentuated the problem. Another NBN exercise which caused unprecedented community reaction was Project Restart, a television program aimed at teaching the life-saving skill of cardiopulmonary resuscitation, or CPR. Around 8,000 people turned up to free lessons conducted one Saturday in December by ambulance officers throughout northern New South Wales. One man who also knows how to turn on a show is Mandaway Yunupingu. Named Australian of the Year in what was the Year of the Indigenous People, Mandaway and band Yothu Yindi performed in Newcastle in February. There were numerous other celebrations of Aboriginal culture throughout the region. We also saw local Aboriginal activist Bill Smith being bestowed the title of New South Wales Aborigine of the Year. February 13th proved a black day for the rescue helicopter. Angel One had been attempting to land in the Barrington Tops to retrieve an injured bushwalker. In bad weather and poor visibility, the Dauphine machine clipped power lines and crashed into a paddock near the Barrington Guest House west of Dungog. The crew survived, but unfortunately the injured bushwalker died while waiting for help to arrive. The search began for a replacement aircraft. 3 weeks later, a Bell 212 was leased from the RAF in Western Australia, and no sooner had it arrived than it was called to transport a seriously ill 63-year-old woman from Dungog to John Hunter Hospital. After a worldwide search lasting 9 months, the Hunter's new permanent rescue helicopter arrived in Newcastle. The Bell 412 was bought in Japan and is worth around $3 million. More than $700,000 of this was raised through donations from the community. Among its specialist features, the capacity to carry 5 stretcher patients in one lift. The Bell 412 has carried out more than 160 missions, confirming its valuable role in the community. From air to sea rescue, and the Lake Macquarie Coast Guard was also left searching for a vessel after their boat became a casualty of big surf while assisting in the rescue of several board riders in rough conditions off Swansea. Still on rescue, and fire officers had more than their fair share of work this year. In November, officers were called to this fire in a flat in the Newcastle suburb of Hamilton South. While they fought the blaze, paramedics treated the unit's tenant, 33-year-old Harold Boyle. He suffered 2nd and 3rd degree burns to 30% of his body. A 35-year-old next-door neighbour was also burnt in the fire. He was taken to hospital and later charged in relation to the incident. Another house fire in Mayfield revealed the heroics of a 9-year-old girl. With their mother and sister away, Kira Griffin was inside the house with her brothers and 6-month-old niece when the blaze broke out. Neighbours helped evacuate the children. Kira grabbed the baby and ran.
I thought that she was already dead because the smoke was up in there and we were nearly touching the beanbag.
Kira and her family lost everything that day. Fire officers say the children are lucky to be alive. 2 children weren't as lucky in this fire in a flat at Waratah in suburban Newcastle. 2-year-old Jared James Ting and Carol Ann Milton, aged 4, were playing in an upstairs bedroom where it's believed the fire started. As adults celebrated a neighbour's birthday downstairs, the children became trapped by the flames.
I could hear Caroline, but I just couldn't get to her. No one could get them. It was just, the fire was so severe, the smoke was thick.
The toddlers were rushed to hospital but died soon after. It's thought they may have been playing with matches when the blaze broke out. In late November, one of Cessnock's oldest homes was completely gutted, believed to have been deliberately lit. The fire started in the middle of the unoccupied house, but before long was lapping out of the windows. The dry old timbers, perfect fuel. Neighbours and passers-by helped out, but there was nothing they or fire officers could do. 100 years of history gone in 20 minutes. Newcastle Harbour roared to the sound of Formula powerboats during the annual regatta. However, this year, racing was marred by the tragic death of Gold Coast driver Chris Antiste. Going into a turn at 160 kilometres an hour, Mr Antiste's boat flipped, trapping him underneath for several minutes. In September, there was another powerboat racing accident. As the driver's Waikato-class boat topped 100 kilometres an hour in a challenge on the Central Coast, something went wrong. Remarkably, the driver escaped injury and actually swam back to shore. Still on the water, and Newcastle turned on small but well-shaped waves for the week-long Surfest competition in March. Sydney sider Pam Burridge won the ladies' final, while former world champion Barton Lynch took out an action-packed men's final. Auski 93 at Raymond Terrace and defending world champion Bruce Neville relinquished his world ski jump crown to American Scott Ellis. Also achieving international acclaim, Newcastle wave skier Lisa Ryan. Having defended her Australian title for the 2nd consecutive year, the 22-year-old clinched the world title in South Africa in June. Our league teams had mixed fortunes, Knights reserve grade faring the best. Although they were bridesmaids, they made history by being the first Newcastle League team to make a Winfield Grand Final. Knights first grade and the Newcastle Breakers soccer side failed to make the playoffs. However, our Falcon basketballers did, losing to the Brisbane Bullets in the quarter-finals. Newcastle Rugby League played its grand final at No. 1 Sports Ground, the home of rugby league in Newcastle, and for the first time in 47 years, Curry were the victors. The No. 1 Sports Ground also saw a return of international cricket in October, the 4-day match between New South Wales and New Zealand, the first since the earthquake. The region played host to the Australian Under-16 Girls Hockey Championships in August and state-age netball titles, the 3-day event bringing more than 2,000 players to local courts. It was the second day of March. 2 cars, a police van and a utility had stopped at roadworks near Branxton on the New England Highway when a semi-trailer going the same way ploughed into the back of the stationary vehicles. Initially, the concertinaed carnage proved so great, police could not establish how many people had died in the crash.
There's only one word for it, it's horrific.
3 people died. 4 others, including 2 female officers in the police van, were injured. 5 months later, and police were astounded when a similar accident occurred just a few kilometres down the road. This time, a semi-trailer could not stop in time, slamming into a queue of vehicles stopped for roadworks on Black Creek Bridge. The domino effect caused the cars to burst into flames. Craig Graham, who was driving the tabletop truck, risked his own life to drag people to safety.
The last bloke that I pulled out, he was on fire. I was putting him, that's how it blew my hand. I was putting him out as I was pulling him out of the window.
The state's road toll took a gigantic leap on an early January morning when 5 people died in this crash on the Pacific Highway near Nabiac. And teenagers were the victims in this late-night single-vehicle accident near Cessnock in November. The 3 occupants died instantly when their car hit a pole. Police believe the car was travelling more than 135 kilometres an hour. This senseless loss of life occurred minutes before the start of a police operation targeting the driving habits of young motorists. In November, a driver from Nowandock and his Central Coast passenger were killed when their fully loaded cattle truck careered through a safety rail and plunged 100 metres down a gully 40 kilometres north of Gloucester. There were many other road crashes and, sadly, fatalities this year. However, the encouraging news is fewer people lost their lives on the roads compared with 1992.
In the past, New Year's Eve celebrations on the Mid-North Coast have become a little out of hand. This year, police were taking no chances. With no main outdoor concert at John Wright Park and parts of Foster Tuncurry declared alcohol-free, welcoming in the new year went off without a hitch. Mid-North Coast Police made only a handful of arrests throughout the region, mainly for minor street offences, and were generally pleased with the behaviour of revellers. A carnival on Coffs Harbour's jetty foreshore provided plenty of New Year's Eve entertainment for those with strong stomachs. The roller coaster proved to be the most popular, although some were a little apprehensive. Mum and Dad were shown the latest dance steps, while others were just content to say goodbye to 1993, watching the skies light up with colour in a spectacular fireworks show. Conditions on the Manning couldn't have been better today. 10-knot east-northeasterly winds and clear skies made way for a great day of sailing. Today's race was the last in the Manly Graduate Series. Results came down to the wire with a quarter of a point separating the first 3 boats. Tyree vessel Dirty Harry, skippered by Les Mansell, was the overall winner. They now lay claim to the Australian title. In second place was Barry Jury's Outlaw, followed by Tyree father and son team, Philip and Marcus Linfield, on board Go for Broke. An invitational race will be held on the Manning River on Monday.
It's day 4 of the championships and the conditions have improved every day. This afternoon a 15 knot southeasterly wind blasted across the lake, providing plenty of speed at the marker buoys. The one-man cat rigs receiving the best get up and go. Sydney sailor Noel Grellett is leading the one-man point score, while Yamina's Scott Crichton and Linda Ryan are now second in the overall point score after their win today. The winning crew is determined by the best point score from 7 of the 8 races. At the moment, the South Australian team of John and Geraldine Amos are leading. But with only a few points separating first to fourth, crews are pulling out all stops to win. Tomorrow's heats start at 2 o'clock.
Extra bushfire personnel have been called to the Richmond River area on the far north coast to battle yet another blaze south of Evans Head. They are attempting to prevent the fire spreading any further south towards homes. The blaze has so far burnt out at least 1,500 hectares of the Bundjalung National Park. Woodburn police were called in this afternoon to evacuate people from a caravan park, and police are standing by to control traffic north of Maclean. The hard work of almost 200 volunteers has reduced the number of separate fire outbreaks in the Clarence Valley region, but a couple are continuing to worry firefighters. Helicopters are being brought in for aerial surveillance and water dumping. And fires are still burning in the Hunter Valley, about 25 kilometres east of Cessnock. Firefighters are making some progress, but a state of emergency is in force, and brigades say a forecast strong northwesterly wind could make it more difficult to contain the blaze.
Followed by Celebration Bell and favourite actress Wide Out. Our Red Star driving at Final Answer. Final Answer just in front. She's holding on to that lead, and Final Answer wins it narrowly to Our Red Star.
5, 2 and 3. Final Answer paid a healthy $11.70 and $4.50. Not enough starters though for a third divvy. The Quinella $37.50 and the Trifecta $268.70. And at Newcastle, a new sprinting champion may have been found in the NJC Class 1 handicap. 2, 4 and 3 and an appropriately named Spoils of Victory paid $5.50 and $1.40. The Quinella $25.60 and the Trifecta $62.30.
Police were baffled by the discovery of a body found floating in Newcastle Harbour yesterday.
When we retrieved the body, all there was a shirt. That's all he had, his striped shirt on, nothing else. And there was nothing found on the beach. So there was a bit of a mystery of who he was.
No one matching his description had been reported missing. Police were only able to identify him through fingerprints. He was 35-year-old Leo Gugugevsky from Sydney. It's believed he was the same man last seen swimming off the southern breakwall at Nobby's Beach on December 27.
He was swimming, laying on his back and just throwing his arms. About 3 or 4 strokes before he went under.
A post-mortem will be held on Tuesday. Four separate fires have raged through the Yango State Forest for a week. 3 of them are being brought under control. One, though, is still eluding firefighters.
It's a running fire, but we are containing it. Troops have been out there this morning early. We're confident they can contain that fire this afternoon.
Much of the water in nearby dams has been used by firefighters during the past week. They now have to draw their water from further afield.
It's slowing down the effort. It's slowing down our operation, and if we had water on site, we'd do it quicker. But unfortunately, the weather's against us and the water's not close.
Controlled backburning is underway. It's been a long week for those fighting the fires.
It's pretty drawing on people, and we are having trouble sometimes finding new crews, but we're a volunteer organisation, our people, and it's funny, they seem to keep going.
The state of emergency will remain in force until the last of the fires are brought under control. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
The 55-year-old Springwood man was found floating face down in the surf at the northern end of Bluey's Beach at Pacific Palms. He was dragged ashore by another swimmer. 2 doctors holidaying in the area applied resuscitation for around 45 minutes.
Luckily there were 2 doctors on the scene who started CPR straight away, and we were able to arrive and give this gentleman further medication.
An ambulance took the man to a waiting rescue helicopter, which transferred him to Newcastle's John Hunter Hospital, where he remains in a critical condition. Police are unsure if the man got into difficulty in the surf or suffered a heart attack. It's believed he was holidaying with relatives.
Transfield has several sites on Kooragang, with one of the biggest current contracts being the construction of hull modules for the Anzac frigate project. It's believed Newcastle is being considered by the company for construction of the topside module for Esso's new oil rig to be established in the West Tuna Basin. NBN News understands Transfield's Newcastle operation has already been informed of the company's latest success with the Esso contract. Newcastle Trades Hall Council says while it's not surprised, it's still awaiting confirmation of the build site for the project, believing Newcastle is only one card in Transfield's deck for the project. There's speculation Transfield may utilise more land on Kooragang for construction of the section. Esso says an announcement on the project could be made before the middle of the month.
Howes Valley fire has blazed through rugged country for more than a week. Now it's threatening the Cessnock side of the range. 17 rural homes have been evacuated as a precaution, and firefighters will be back burning through the night. In closely wooded hills west of Wyong, 50 fire crews have been fighting a desperate battle to contain a fire which it's feared could threaten property in the village of Yarramalong if there's an increase in wind strength. False Sydney media reports that the township of Wyong itself was under threat have been discounted by Wyong Fire Control. 2 Navy helicopters will be brought into this area tomorrow to assist. The fire situation on the Central Coast was inspected by the New South Wales Governor, Rear Admiral Peter Sinclair, whose praise of firefighters reflects the community's gratitude.
I never cease to be amazed at what we other Australians expect them to do, and yet they do it cheerfully and willingly, put their lives at risk as they're doing exactly at this moment.
The fierce fires that swept through the Lower Coalfields area and into Lake Macquarie have left their mark on the countryside, but minimal property losses are a tribute to the professionalism of the firefighters. A combined operation involving bushfire volunteers and New South Wales Brigade members, it used resources that range from an Army engineering unit through to bulldozers, and just plain people power. The aim to continually isolate and contain fires, preventing them building into uncontrollable fronts. And today a brief bonus as a southerly change brought a light shower. The splash of rain in the face, enough of a morale booster for waiting crews to indulge in a light-hearted test. The pitch, a road that was still closed. The strategy now is to keep up the pressure to fully extinguish all fires. From experience, fire controllers know the next set of weather conditions can bring new problems. Jim Sullivan, NBN News.
Yesterday, these 200 Victorian firefighters were battling a blaze near Bulga in the Hunter Valley. Today, they were redeployed to Gloucester. Today's cooler conditions have eased the situation somewhat here in the Gloucester area, but that could change towards the end of the week. The winds are again expected to pick up and the temperature creep towards the high 30s. There are 16 fires burning in the Gloucester district, with the most serious outbreak at Giro, around 50 kilometres northwest of the town. While there is no property threatened at this stage, the fire could flare out of control at any time. So far, around 8,000 hectares of steep, rugged bushland have been burned.
The fires that we've got, they're not large in themselves, not like the ones in Sydney, but they're scattered in rugged and isolated country, and we just didn't have enough people to attend them all adequately.
While the Giro blaze was being carefully watched from the air, further south at Craven, the Victorians were back burning. If they can establish a reasonable break in the next day or so, then they may be able to beat the blaze later in the week when the weather changes.
We've got to try and do whatever we can now while the conditions are right to secure those fire lines.
Jodie McKay, NBN News. With a tertiary entrance rank of 99.9%, Sanjeev Gupta of Elibana came second in the Hunter region for his HSC, behind Scott Brown of Dungog, who received 99.95%. Despite his sterling effort, the quiet achiever was still shocked at just how well he had done.
It's pretty stoked, really. It's a bit of a shock.
Sanjeev plans following his brother and father's footsteps and studying medicine at the University of New South Wales in Sydney. While that will be tough, Sanjeev hopes it won't be as rigorous as his last year at school.
I had to work harder than I'd ever like to again.
Sanjeev was one of 17 students from the Hunter region who received a TER score that placed them in the top 1% of the state. The top 10 in the region all received marks over 99.35%. The next step is to find out just who has made it into what university course. The first round of offers come out in 2 weeks.
The job is expected to take 2 weeks.
Well, what we've done is we've taken the blast furnace and we've got to extend its life by a period of 3.5+ years to keep it operational for Rotten Bar.
The blast furnace is like a giant oven that can produce up to 1 million tonnes of iron each year. Workers are replacing cooling panels, valves to improve gas flow and filter systems. The main problem for BHP is the loss of 2 weeks of operations, although January was chosen as it's the quietest time for orders. The furnace was built in 1963. Today's replacement would cost $500 to $600 million. But engineers say when these repairs are finished, it will be the equal of any blast furnace in the world.
The Williamtown RAAF base was the staging ground for continuing firefighting operations in the Hunter. Black Hawk and Sea King helicopters were at the ready with water bombing buckets, and an Air Force Hercules transport aircraft airlifted 70 Victorian firefighters to their homes. A fresh contingent of reserves arrived later in the day. 180 Victorian Country Fire Authority volunteers fought the big outbreaks on the Central Coast and Hunter at the height of the emergency. This crew battled fires at Woy Woy and Putty. If they hadn't seen enough of fire engines over the past few days, they were interested in the RAAF's firefighting equipment. The Herc isn't VIP transport, but the RAF did its best to make the volunteers, most from Gippsland, comfortable for their trip to Sale. They were supplied with in-flight refreshments. Other CFA crews remain in the Gloucester and Central Coast areas. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.
This is street theatre. It's wild and zany, and in recent times it's been a popular addition to the Newcastle show. But street acts like this are mostly brought in from Sydney at a considerable cost. Instead of paying for imports, the Newcastle Show Committee has put $10,000 towards developing local talent. The workshops are being run by street theatre group Armchair Factotum.
Yes, there are some people we can call on and they do a great job, but we just need more big, large images, people working specifically for the street and for festivals.
The Newcastle show will be held during the first week of March. Till then, numerous weekend workshops will be held at the Broadmeadow Showground, and it's an open invitation to participate.